Hey everyone, welcome to Ricktopus. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that every single character in Rick and Morty is held together by one defining trait. And that trait is not just a piece of their personality. It is the entire foundation their identity is built on. From Rick's intelligence to Morty's anxiety to Jerry's insecurity, each character has one core quality that shapes how they think, how they act, how they relate to the people around them, and most importantly, how they survive in a universe that is constantly trying to break them down. And what I want to show you across this video is that if you remove that one trait, you do not just get a slightly different version of the character, you get a completely different person. In some cases, you get someone who is unrecognizable. In other cases, you get someone who is genuinely dangerous. And in almost every case, you lose something that the show cannot function without. These traits are not accessories. They are load-bearing walls. Pull one out and the whole structure comes down. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. Rick Sanchez without his intelligence. Rick Sanchez is the smartest being in the universe. That is not just something fans say. The show makes this clear from the very first episode. Rick can build things that entire governments and alien civilizations cannot even dream of. He built a portal gun that lets him jump between dimensions whenever he wants. He built a spaceship in his daughter's garage. He has created devices that can do almost anything you can think of. His brain is the reason the show exists the way it does. Without Rick being the smartest person alive, there are no adventures. There are no escapes. There are no impossible inventions saving the day at the last second. His intelligence is not just something he has, it is everything he is. So what happens if you take it away? What happens if Rick Sanchez wakes up one day and he is just a regular old man? Not the smartest being in the universe, not a genius, just a guy, a normal, average, nothing special grandfather living in his daughter's house. That is what this section is about. And the answer is honestly one of the saddest things you can imagine when you really sit with it. Let us start with the most obvious thing. If Rick does not have his intelligence, he does not have his inventions. No portal gun, no spaceship, no gadgets hidden in his lab coat. The garage is just a garage. It has a car in it, maybe some old boxes, and that is it. There is no secret lab underneath the house. There are no experiments running. There are no alien projects half finished on the workbench. Everything that makes Rick powerful disappears the moment his brain becomes average. And that matters more than you might think. Because Rick without his inventions is Rick without his freedom. The portal gun is not just a cool tool, it is his escape from everything. Whenever things get hard, whenever relationships get messy, whenever he does not want to deal with something, he opens a portal and leaves. He has been doing this his entire life. He left his daughter Beth when she was a child. He disappeared for years. And the only reason he could do that is because he had the technology to go anywhere in the universe at any time. A normal Rick cannot run. A normal Rick is stuck. And Rick being stuck is something the show has told us he cannot handle. Think about the episode where Rick turns himself into a pickle. He literally transformed his entire body into a pickle just to avoid going to family therapy. That is how far this man will go to escape dealing with his emotions. The therapist in that episode, Dr. Wong, says something really important. She tells Rick that his genius allows him to avoid doing the hard, boring work of actually being a person. She says that he uses his intelligence to run away from the simple, unglamorous effort it takes to be a functioning member of a family. And she is completely right. Rick's intelligence is his shield. It is the thing standing between him and having to actually face himself. Without it, there is no shield. There is no escape hatch. There is just Rick sitting in a room, having to deal with the fact that his marriage fell apart, that he abandoned his daughter, that his wife is gone, and that he has spent his whole life pushing away every single person who has ever tried to love him. And here is what makes it even worse. Without his intelligence, Rick still has all of his personality flaws. He is still arrogant. He is still rude. He is still selfish. He still drinks too much. He still pushes people away. He still thinks he is better than everyone around him, but now he has absolutely nothing to back it up. Right now in the show, Rick can be the most unpleasant person in the room and get away with it, because at the end of the day, he really is the smartest person alive. People tolerate him because he is useful. The government wants him because his brain is valuable. Other Ricks respect him because of what he can do. Even his family puts up with his behavior because his genius has saved their lives more times than they can count. But take the genius away, and what are you left with? You are left with a mean old man who drinks too much and treats everyone around him badly. That is it. That is all there is. And nobody is going to put up with that for very long. Look at how the family treats Jerry. Jerry is not smart. Jerry is not talented. Jerry is not useful in any real way. And because of that, the family walks all over him. Rick mocks him constantly. Beth struggles to respect him. Even Summer and Morty treat him like a joke sometimes. The show makes it very clear that in the Smith household, your value is tied to what you can do. And Jerry cannot do much. Now imagine Rick in that same position. Imagine Rick with Jerry's level of ability. The family would not just lose respect for him, they would be confused by him. Because Rick's entire identity, the way he carries himself, the way he talks to people, the way he walks into a room like he owns it, all of that is built on the foundation of his intelligence. Without that foundation, the whole building falls down. He is just a grumpy old man with a drinking problem who lives in his daughter's house and contributes nothing. And that brings us to something the show has actually explored. Rick's biggest fear is being ordinary. He has said it in different ways across the show, but it always comes back to the same thing. Rick needs to be special. He needs to be the exception. He needs to be the one person who can do what nobody else can do. That is not just ego. That is survival for him, because if Rick is not the smartest, if Rick is not the most capable, then he has to face the fact that he is just a broken man who has lost everything that mattered to him. His wife Diane is gone. His original daughter is gone. He spent years hunting down the Rick who was responsible for their deaths. His intelligence was the only thing that gave him the power to do that. It was the only thing that gave his pain a direction. Without it, he is just a man sitting with grief that has nowhere to go. The show gives us a really clear picture of what Rick looks like when his intelligence fails him, or when he is forced to confront life without it as a crutch. In the episode where he tries to cure his curse from a love potion gone wrong, things spiral completely out of control. Each solution he invents creates a bigger problem. And for a moment, you see what it looks like when Rick's brain cannot save him. He panics. He makes it worse. He ends up having to abandon an entire dimension because he messed things up so badly that there was no fixing it. He literally drags Morty to a new dimension where the other versions of themselves have just died, and they bury their own dead bodies in the backyard and take over their lives. That is the backup plan. That is what happens when intelligence is not enough. Now imagine intelligence is never there in the first place. There is no backup plan. There is no new dimension to escape to. There is just the mess, and you have to live in it. Rick, without his intelligence, also loses the one thing that connects him to other people in a meaningful way. Think about his friendship with Birdperson. They met through shared adventures. They fought together in battles against the Galactic Federation. Those experiences were possible because of what Rick could build and what Rick could do. Without his genius, Rick never meets Birdperson. He never fights alongside him. He never forms that bond. The same goes for Squanchy and the rest of his old crew. Rick's intelligence is what brought him into the world where those friendships could exist. Without it, he is just a regular person living a regular life, and he probably never meets any of them. And then there is Morty. The entire relationship between Rick and Morty exists because Rick needs a sidekick for his adventures. He needs someone to come along, someone whose brainwaves cancel out his own, someone he can drag through portals and into danger. But if there are no adventures, there is no need for a sidekick. Without his intelligence, Rick is just Morty's grandfather. And based on everything the show has told us about Rick as a person, he would not be a very good one. He would still be distant, he would still drink, he would still be emotionally unavailable. But now, without the adventures to bond over, without the life and death situations that force them to rely on each other, there is nothing pulling Rick and Morty together. They are just two people living in the same house with no real connection. And that might be the saddest part of all of this. Because for all of Rick's flaws, his relationship with Morty is the closest thing he has to genuine love. Take away the intelligence, and you take away the circumstances that let that love exist. So when you strip Rick Sanchez of his intelligence, you do not just lose the gadgets and the adventures. You lose the thing that makes anyone care about him. You lose the thing that gives him purpose. You lose the thing that lets him run from his pain. And you are left with a man who has nothing but his worst qualities. A man who is angry, sad, alone, and for the first time in his life, completely powerless to do anything about it. The smartest man in the universe, without his intelligence, is not just a lesser version of Rick. He is a tragedy. He is every bad decision, every burned bridge, every abandoned relationship, all without the one thing that let him pretend none of it mattered. Rick's intelligence does not just define what he can do, it defines who he is allowed to be. And without it, he is not allowed to be anything at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Rick is not the only character in this show whose single defining trait holds their entire identity together. Because when you look at Morty, and that constant, never-ending anxiety running through everything he does, you start to realize that taking that away changes the show in a completely different but equally massive way. Section 2. Morty Smith without his anxiety. Morty Smith is afraid of everything. That is not an insult. That is just who he is. From the very first episode of the show, Morty is the kid who does not want to go on the adventure. He is the one saying no. He is the one asking if they can please just go home. He is the one whose voice is shaking while Rick is laughing. Morty stammers when he talks. He second-guesses himself constantly. He worries about school, about his family, about whether Jessica notices him, about whether he is going to die on whatever insane planet Rick has dragged him to this week. His anxiety is not just a small part of who he is. It is the lens he sees the entire world through. Every single decision Morty makes is filtered through fear first. And that fear is what makes him the perfect partner for Rick, because Rick has no fear at all. The two of them balance each other out. Rick is reckless, Morty is cautious. Rick does not care about consequences, Morty cannot stop thinking about them. That push and pull between the two of them is the heartbeat of the entire show. So what happens if you take Morty's anxiety away? What happens if Morty wakes up one morning and he is not scared anymore? He does not stammer, he does not hesitate, he does not stand behind Rick shaking and begging to go home. He just goes along with everything, willingly, confidently, without a second thought. At first, that might sound like a good thing. It might sound like Morty would finally get to enjoy the adventures instead of being terrified through all of them. But when you really think about it, removing Morty's anxiety does not make the show better. It breaks it completely. The first thing that changes is the dynamic between Rick and Morty. Right now, Morty pushes back. He argues. He says this is a bad idea. He begs Rick to think about what they are doing. And most of the time, Rick ignores him. But here is the thing that is easy to miss. Morty being afraid is what keeps Rick even slightly connected to the idea that actions have consequences. When Morty is panicking, when Morty is crying, when Morty is screaming that people are going to get hurt, Rick has to at least acknowledge that someone next to him cares about what happens. He does not always listen. He almost never changes his plan because of it. But Morty's fear is like a tiny voice in Rick's ear, reminding him that not everyone sees the universe as disposable. Without that voice, Rick has no reason to even pretend to care. And Rick, without even the smallest reason to care, is a much darker character than the one we already have. Think about some of the most important moments in the show. When Rick and Morty go to the dimension where they have to fix the love potion disaster, it is Morty who is horrified by what has happened. It is Morty who is shaking as they bury their own dead bodies in the backyard. It is Morty who sits on the couch afterward and stares at nothing because he cannot process what just happened. Rick moves on almost immediately. He grabs a beer and watches TV like nothing happened. But Morty carries that weight. That scene only works because Morty is afraid. Because Morty feels the horror of what they just did. If Morty did not have his anxiety, if he just shrugged it off the way Rick does, that scene loses all of its power. It becomes two people who do not care burying two bodies. And there is nothing interesting about that. There is nothing human about that. Morty's anxiety is also what makes the audience care about him. He is the character we relate to. Most of us are not geniuses like Rick. Most of us do not have the confidence to walk into any situation and feel like we own it. Most of us are a lot more like Morty. We are nervous. We are unsure. We are just trying to get through the day without something going horribly wrong. When Morty is scared, we understand that. When Morty does something brave, even though he is terrified, that means something to us. Because bravery only exists when you are afraid first. If Morty is never afraid, then nothing he does is brave. He is just doing things. And a character who is just doing things without any internal struggle is a boring character. The show has actually shown us what Morty looks like when he starts losing his anxiety and becoming more confident, and it is not a good thing. As the seasons go on, Morty gets more comfortable with the adventures. He starts handling weapons more easily. He starts making decisions faster. He starts caring less about the people who get hurt along the way. And every single time this happens, the show frames it as a loss, not a gain. Morty becoming more like Rick is not presented as growth. It is presented as damage. It is the show telling us that this kid is being broken down by his experiences, and that is a bad thing. There is an episode where Morty gets his hands on a device that lets him remove memories he does not want anymore. He has been using it to erase all the traumatic things that have happened to him on adventures with Rick. And what we learn is that Morty has been through so much horrible stuff that he has erased massive chunks of his own life just to keep functioning. That is what happens when the anxiety starts to go away. It does not mean Morty is getting stronger. It means Morty is losing pieces of himself. There is also the version of Morty that the show presents as having gone completely past fear. Evil Morty. Now, Evil Morty is a different Morty from our Morty, but he is still a version of what a Morty can become. And what is Evil Morty like? He is calm. He is calculating. He does not panic. He does not stammer. He does not beg anyone for anything. He has a plan, and he executes it without hesitation. He manipulated the entire Citadel of Ricks. He won an election. He took control of a society built by the smartest men in the universe, and he did it all without breaking a sweat. Evil Morty is what happens when a Morty stops being afraid. And the show makes it very clear that this is terrifying. Not inspiring, not cool, terrifying. Because a Morty without fear is a Morty without the moral hesitation that keeps him good. Evil Morty does not care who gets hurt. He does not care who dies. He just wants what he wants, and he will do whatever it takes to get it. That is the end point of a Morty with no anxiety. And it is the show's way of telling us that Morty's fear is not a weakness. It is actually one of his most important qualities. And then there is the way Morty's anxiety affects his everyday life, the non-adventure stuff. Morty is terrible at school. He can barely talk to Jessica without falling apart. He struggles to make friends. He is awkward and unsure of himself in almost every social situation. And all of that comes from his anxiety. But here's the thing. Those struggles are what make Morty feel real. He is a 14-year-old kid who is dealing with normal teenage problems on top of being dragged across the universe by his drunk genius grandfather. If Morty was confident and smooth and had no worries at all, he would not feel like a real kid. He would feel like a character from a completely different show. Morty's anxiety grounds the show in something real. It reminds us that underneath all the sci-fi craziness, this is still a story about a kid trying to figure out who he is. Morty's anxiety also drives some of the best emotional moments in the entire series. When Morty stands up to Rick, it matters because we know how scared he is of Rick. When Morty decides to go on an adventure on his own, it matters because we know every part of him wants to stay home where it is safe. When Morty chooses to do the right thing, even though it is dangerous, it matters because we can see the fear on his face and hear it in his voice. Those moments land because of the anxiety that came before them. Without the anxiety, there is no buildup, there is no tension, there is no payoff. Morty just does things, and we feel nothing watching him do them. Think about the episode where Morty asks Rick to let him lead an adventure. He chooses a planet that seems simple and safe. And of course, things go wrong. But the whole point of that story is that Morty tried. He stepped up even though he was scared. He wanted to prove he could handle it. And when everything falls apart, we feel for him because we know how much courage it took for him to try in the first place. If Morty had no anxiety, if he just casually picked an adventure with full confidence, the failure does not hit the same way. It is just a thing that happened. The emotional weight is gone. The show also uses Morty's anxiety to highlight just how messed up his life has become. A normal kid should not be this traumatized. A normal kid should not flinch at loud noises because he has been shot at on alien planets. A normal kid should not have nightmares about monsters and interdimensional wars. Morty's anxiety is the show's way of keeping score. It is the running tally of everything Rick has put him through. And every time we see Morty panic, every time we see him freeze up or break down, we are being reminded of the cost of being Rick Sanchez's grandson. Take that anxiety away, and you take away the show's ability to comment on how Rick's lifestyle destroys the people around him. You lose one of the most important emotional threads in the entire series. Morty without his anxiety is not a better Morty. He is an empty Morty. He is a Morty with no internal conflict, no moral compass pulling him back from the edge, no relatable human quality that makes us root for him. He is either boring because nothing bothers him, or he is dangerous because nothing stops him. Either way, he is not the Morty that makes this show work. The anxiety is not holding Morty back. It is holding him together. It is the thing that keeps him human in a universe that is constantly trying to take his humanity away. And without it, he is just another person floating through the chaos without feeling any of it. Morty's fear might be the most important thing about him. Not because it makes him weak, but because it makes him the only person in Rick's life who still reacts to the universe like it matters. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Morty's anxiety keeps him grounded as the emotional center of the show, there is another character whose single defining trait has the opposite effect. Because when you look at Jerry Smith and that deep, constant insecurity that drives every single thing he does, you realize that removing it would not just change him, it might actually make him the most dangerous person in the entire family. Section 3. Jerry Smith without his insecurity. Jerry Smith is the most insecure character on the entire show. That is not even up for debate. Everything Jerry does, every choice he makes, every word that comes out of his mouth is driven by one thing: his desperate, never-ending need to be approved of. He needs Beth to love him. He needs his kids to respect him. He needs Rick to stop making fun of him. He needs strangers to think he is important. He needs the whole world to look at him and say, "Yes, Jerry, you matter." And the world almost never says that. So Jerry just keeps trying, keeps failing, and keeps embarrassing himself in the process. His insecurity is not just a personality trait. It is his entire operating system. Every single thing about Jerry runs on the fuel of not feeling good enough. And honestly, it would be very easy to just laugh at Jerry and move on. The show certainly wants us to laugh at him most of the time. He is the butt of almost every joke. Rick calls him stupid to his face on a regular basis. Beth questions whether she should have married him at all. Even his own children seem embarrassed by him half the time. Jerry is the punching bag of the Smith family, and the show does not try to hide that. But here is what makes Jerry interesting, and what makes this thought experiment so fascinating. Jerry's insecurity is not just what makes him pathetic. It is also what makes him safe. And a Jerry without insecurity is not a better Jerry. He might actually be a terrifying Jerry. Let me explain what I mean. Right now, Jerry does not take big swings. He does not make power moves. He does not try to control people or dominate situations. And the reason he does not do any of those things is because he is too scared of failing. He is too scared of looking stupid. He is too scared of being rejected. His insecurity keeps him small. It keeps him in his lane. He stays in the background. He goes along with what everyone else wants, and he avoids conflict whenever he can. That might make him seem weak, and in a lot of ways it does, but it also means Jerry is harmless. He is annoying, sure. He is frustrating to watch, absolutely. But he is not dangerous. He does not hurt people on purpose. He does not manipulate. He does not scheme. He is just a sad guy trying to get through the day without being humiliated. But take the insecurity away, and everything changes. Because here is the thing about Jerry that the show has quietly shown us over and over again. Jerry is not actually as dumb as everyone thinks he is. He is not a genius, not even close. But he is not completely useless either. He has pulled off things throughout the show that nobody expected him to pull off. He survived on an alien planet by himself. He somehow kept himself alive in situations where smarter characters would have panicked. He has talked his way out of corners that seemed impossible. The problem is that every time Jerry starts to build some momentum, every time he starts to show a little backbone, his insecurity kicks in and he sabotages himself. He backs down. He apologizes when he does not need to. He gives up the second someone pushes back. His insecurity is the ceiling that keeps him from ever reaching his potential. Remove that ceiling, and Jerry might actually become someone the family needs to worry about. Think about the times in the show when Jerry has gotten a taste of confidence. It never goes well. When Jerry feels good about himself, even for a short time, he becomes a completely different person. He gets loud. He gets aggressive. He starts making demands. He stops listening to other people. And every time it blows up in his face, because Jerry does not know how to handle power. He has never had it before. So when he gets a little bit of it, he goes overboard. Now imagine that is his permanent state. Imagine Jerry wakes up one morning and the insecurity is just gone. He does not care what Rick thinks of him. He does not care if Beth is disappointed. He does not care if his kids roll their eyes. He just does whatever he wants, says whatever he thinks, and pushes for whatever he believes he deserves. That is a version of Jerry that could genuinely cause problems. And here is why that matters so much. The entire balance of the Smith household depends on Jerry being in his current position. Rick is at the top because of his intelligence. Beth is in the middle because of her connection to Rick and her role as the functioning adult. Summer and Morty are below that, and Jerry is at the very bottom. Everyone knows their place. And Jerry being at the bottom is what keeps things stable in a weird way. Because Jerry being weak means there is no one challenging Rick for control of the family. There is no one pushing back against the way things work. Jerry just accepts his position and complains about it quietly. But a confident Jerry would not accept that. A confident Jerry would look around and say, wait a minute, this is my house, these are my kids, that is my wife, and this old man who moved into my home and turned my garage into a lab does not get to run everything. A confident Jerry goes to war with Rick, and that war would tear the family apart. The show has shown us what happens when Jerry puts his foot down, and it creates real conflict every single time. When Jerry forced Beth to choose between him and Rick, she chose Jerry, and Rick had to leave the house. That actually happened. Jerry, the guy everyone laughs at, the guy nobody takes seriously, got Rick Sanchez kicked out of his own family. And he did that while still being insecure. Imagine what he could have done if he was actually confident. That moment showed us that Jerry does have power in this family. He has power because Beth loves him, even if she is not always sure why. He has power because he is the father of her children. He has power because at the end of the day, he is her husband, and that means something to her, even when she wishes it did not. Jerry's insecurity prevents him from using that power effectively. He always folds. He always gives in. He always ends up right back at the bottom. But without the insecurity, Jerry would hold his ground. And holding his ground means the entire family structure changes. Let us also talk about what Jerry's insecurity does to his relationship with Beth specifically. Beth married Jerry because she got pregnant in high school. The show does not hide this. It is a central part of their story. And Jerry knows this. He knows that Beth might not have chosen him if the circumstances were different. He knows that Beth wonders what her life could have been. He knows that she looks at him sometimes and sees a mistake she is stuck with. And that knowledge eats him alive. It makes him clingy. It makes him needy. It makes him do embarrassing things to try to prove his worth. But it also makes him stay. Jerry stays because he is terrified of being alone. He is terrified of losing Beth because he does not believe he could ever do better. His insecurity traps him in a marriage that makes him miserable, but it also keeps the family unit together. Without that insecurity, Jerry might actually leave. Think about that. A Jerry who does not need Beth's approval is a Jerry who might look at his marriage and say, "This is not working, and I deserve better." A Jerry who is not afraid of being alone might walk out the door and never come back. And if Jerry leaves, everything changes. The family splits, the kids have to choose. Beth is alone with Rick, which is a dynamic the show has explored, and it is not healthy. Rick enables Beth's worst instincts. He tells her she is special, she is a genius, she is wasted on her current life. Without Jerry there to ground things, to be the normal, boring, human element of the family, Beth drifts further into Rick's orbit. And Rick's orbit is not a good place for anyone to be. There is another layer to this that is worth thinking about. Jerry's insecurity makes him the most human character on the show. Everyone else has something extraordinary about them. Rick has his genius. Beth has her surgical skills and her complicated relationship with the smartest man alive. Summer has adapted to the adventures and become capable in her own way. Even Morty has been shaped by his experiences into something more than a normal kid. But Jerry is just a regular person. He has a normal job, he has normal problems, he is not special in any way, and he knows it. And that makes him relatable in a way that no other character on the show is. We all know what it feels like to be the least impressive person in the room. We all know what it feels like to wonder if the people we love actually respect us. Jerry's insecurity is painful to watch, but it is also deeply human. Take it away and you lose the most grounded, most relatable emotional thread on the entire show. Jerry without insecurity also loses something important: his humor. So much of what makes Jerry funny comes from his desperate attempts to be liked. The way he pitches terrible ideas with complete enthusiasm. The way he tries to bond with Rick and gets shut down every time. The way he celebrates tiny victories like they are world-changing achievements. All of that comes from his insecurity. A confident Jerry is not funny in the same way. He is just a guy saying things and doing things without the underlying desperation that makes it comedy. The gap between how Jerry sees himself and how the world sees him is where all the humor lives. Close that gap, and the jokes disappear. So Jerry's insecurity is not just a weakness. It is a load-bearing wall. It holds up his relationships, his humor, his role in the family, and his place in the show. Take it out, and everything built on top of it comes crashing down. You do not get a better Jerry. You get a Jerry who is either dangerous because he finally has the confidence to fight for control, or a Jerry who is gone because he finally has the self-respect to leave. Either way, the Smith family as we know it does not survive. Jerry might be the weakest person in the room, but his weakness is exactly what holds the room together. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Jerry is not the only one in this family whose deepest emotional wound shapes everything about who they are. Because when you look at Beth and that lifelong, all-consuming need for her father's approval, start to see that her entire identity might be built on an even more fragile foundation than Jerry's. Section 4. Beth Smith without her daddy issues. Beth Smith is a complicated woman. On the surface, she looks like she has it together. She is a surgeon. Yes, she operates on horses, not people, but she is still a surgeon. She has a house, a family, 2 kids, and a husband. From the outside looking in, Beth has built a life. But the show makes it very clear from very early on that none of that is what drives Beth. None of that is what keeps her up at night. None of that is what makes her happy or sad or angry. The thing that controls every single part of Beth's life, the invisible hand behind every decision she has ever made, is her relationship with her father. Rick Sanchez, the smartest man in the universe, the man who left her when she was a child and did not come back for years. Beth's entire existence revolves around one question that she has been asking since she was a little girl. Does my dad love me? And no matter how many times Rick comes back, no matter how many times he says something that sounds like affection, Beth is never sure of the answer. That uncertainty is the engine that runs her entire life. So what happens when you take that away? What happens if Beth wakes up one morning and she simply does not care what Rick thinks of her anymore? She does not need his approval. She does not need his validation. She does not need him to tell her she is smart or special or better than the life she is living. She just does not care. At first, that sounds like freedom. It sounds like Beth would finally be able to live her life on her own terms, without constantly measuring herself against her father's expectations. But when you look at how deeply this one trait is woven into everything about Beth, you realize that removing it does not just change her, it dismantles her entirely. Let us start with the biggest thing. Beth's daddy issues are the reason she is still married to Jerry. The show has made this connection very clear. Beth got pregnant with Summer when she was in high school. She was a teenager with her whole life ahead of her. She was smart enough to become a real surgeon, a people surgeon, and everyone around her knew it. But she got pregnant, and she married Jerry, and she gave up that future. And the show tells us why. Beth did not have a father around. Rick was gone. He disappeared when she was young and left her without a parent, without guidance, without the one person she looked up to most. And when Beth got pregnant, she did not have Rick there to help her figure out what to do. She made the safe choice. She chose stability. She chose Jerry because Jerry was there and Jerry was safe and Jerry was not going to leave. Everything about Beth's marriage goes back to the hole Rick left when he walked out of her life. She chose a husband who would never abandon her because her father already did. So if Beth does not have daddy issues, if she does not carry that wound of abandonment, the math changes completely. A Beth who is not driven by the fear of being left behind is a Beth who probably does not marry Jerry at all. She might still have gotten pregnant. That could still happen. But without the deep need for security that Rick's absence created, Beth might have made a completely different choice. She might have raised Summer on her own. She might have gone to medical school anyway. She might have become the brilliant, high-achieving person everyone always said she could be. And that means no marriage, no Jerry in the picture full-time, no Morty, and no Smith family as we know it. Beth's daddy issues are not just her problem. They are the reason this family exists in its current form. Now, let us talk about what happens when Rick comes back. Rick shows up at Beth's door after being gone for years, and Beth lets him in. She lets him move into her house. She lets him build a lab in her garage. She lets him take her son on dangerous adventures across the universe. And she does all of this because she is so desperate to have her father in her life that she will accept almost anything just to keep him around. Beth overlooks things that no rational person would overlook. She ignores the danger Rick puts Morty in. She makes excuses for his drinking. She defends him to Jerry even when Jerry is clearly right to be concerned. Beth does all of this because deep down she believes that if she pushes back too hard, if she makes too many demands, if she is too difficult, Rick will leave again. And she cannot survive that. Not again. Without her daddy issues, Beth does not tolerate any of this. A Beth who does not need Rick's approval is a Beth who looks at this situation clearly and says no. You cannot turn my garage into a lab. You cannot take my son to alien planets. You cannot come and go as you please and expect me to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. A Beth without daddy issues sets boundaries. She tells Rick that if he wants to be part of this family, he has to follow the rules of this household. And Rick would never accept that. Rick does not follow rules. Rick does not take orders from anyone, especially not his own daughter. So either Rick falls in line, which goes against everything we know about his character, or Rick leaves. And if Rick leaves, the show loses its central premise. No Rick in the house means no adventures, no portal gun in the garage, no alien conflicts spilling into suburban life. Beth's inability to stand up to her father is literally what keeps the show's setup intact. The show explores this tension in one of its most important episodes. Rick offers Beth a choice. He tells her that he can make a clone of her, a perfect copy that would stay behind and live her life, while the real Beth goes off and explores the universe and does whatever she wants. He gives her the chance to leave everything behind, just like he did. And Beth is torn. She does not know what to do. And the reason she does not know is because both options are really about Rick. If she stays for the family, but also to be near her father. If she goes to be like her father, to follow in his footsteps, to prove that she is as special as he is. Either way, Rick is at the center of the decision. Beth cannot even make a life-changing choice without it being about her dad. That is how deep this goes. Without her daddy issues, that choice is simple. Beth either stays because she genuinely wants to be with her family, or she leaves because she genuinely wants to explore. The decision is about Beth and what Beth wants for Beth. And that clarity, while healthy, removes all of the emotional complexity from one of the most powerful moments in the entire series. The reason that scene hits so hard is because we know Beth is not really choosing between staying and leaving. She is choosing between two different ways of seeking her father's love. Take that away, and it is just a woman making a practical decision about her future. It is fine, but it is not heartbreaking. And the show needs it to be heartbreaking. Beth's daddy issues also shape how she treats the people around her. Look at how she treats Jerry. Beth looks down on Jerry. She does this constantly. She questions his intelligence, his ambition, his worth as a partner. And a big part of the reason she does this is because she is comparing Jerry to Rick. Every man in Beth's life is measured against her father, and nobody measures up. Rick is the smartest man in the universe. Jerry is just Jerry. And Beth resents Jerry for not being more like Rick, even though that is an impossible and unfair standard. Her disappointment in Jerry is really disappointment in herself for choosing someone her father would never respect. Without the daddy issues, Beth stops comparing Jerry to Rick. She either appreciates Jerry for who he is, or she leaves him for legitimate reasons that have nothing to do with her father. Either way, the toxic cycle of resentment and guilt that defines their marriage disappears. And then there's how Beth treats Summer and Morty. Beth is not a bad mother, but she is not a great one either. She is distracted. She is frustrated. She carries a quiet resentment about the life she could have had. And some of that resentment, even though she would never admit it, is directed at her kids. Because Summer is the reason Beth's life changed forever. Summer is the pregnancy that led to the marriage, that led to the house in the suburbs, that led to the horse surgeon career instead of the real surgeon career. Beth loves her children, but she also sees them as evidence of the life she gave up. And all of that traces back to Rick. Beth gave up her dreams because Rick was not there to guide her. She resents the life she built because she believes she was meant for something bigger, something closer to what Rick has. Without the daddy issues, Beth does not carry that resentment. She either owns her choices fully, or she makes different ones. Either way, she is a different mother, a more present one, a more satisfied one. A mother who is not secretly wondering what could have been. There is something else worth talking about here. Beth has moments in the show where she acts in ways that are genuinely unsettling. The show hints heavily that Beth was a troubled child. Rick built her toys that were essentially weapons when she was young. There are references to childhood incidents that suggest Beth may have hurt other children. The show plays with the idea that Beth might have inherited some of Rick's more dangerous qualities, but she has kept them buried under the surface of her normal suburban life. And the thing keeping them buried is, in part, her desire to be the kind of person Rick would be proud of. She wants to be normal enough that Rick will stay, but special enough that Rick will notice her. That balancing act keeps Beth in check. Without the daddy issues, without that need to perform for Rick, there is no telling which version of Beth comes out. The stable surgeon and mother, or the person who might have been something much darker if left to her own instincts. Beth without her daddy issues is healthier. That is true. She would probably be a more stable person, a more honest partner, a more present mother. But she would also be a completely different character, living a completely different life. And the family that exists around her right now, the one held together by guilt and love and resentment and fear and desperate hope, that family does not exist without Beth's wound. Her daddy issues are not just her burden. They are the glue holding the Smith family together. Messy, toxic, deeply unhealthy glue, but glue all the same. Beth is broken because Rick broke her. And everything she has built since then, her marriage, her family, her life, is built on top of that broken foundation. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Beth is not the only Smith kid still dealing with the damage of growing up in that house. Because when you look at Summer and that obsessive need to be seen as cool, to matter, to be relevant, you start to see another version of the same wound showing up in a completely different way. Section 5. Summer Smith, without her need to be cool. Summer Smith is the oldest child in the Smith family, and for most of the early parts of the show, she is the one who cares the most about what other people think. While Morty is getting dragged across the universe by Rick, and Beth is trying to hold her marriage together, and Jerry is just trying to survive another day without being humiliated, Summer is upstairs on her phone, worried about her social life. She wants to be popular, she wants to fit in, she wants to be seen as cool by her friends, by her classmates, by the world outside the Smith house. That might sound shallow at first, and the show definitely plays it for laughs in the beginning. Summer is the teenage girl who rolls her eyes at everything, who is glued to her phone, who treats every minor social situation like it is life or death. But as the show goes on, we start to see that Summer's need to be cool is not just teenage vanity. It runs much deeper than that. It is her way of trying to build an identity in a family where everyone else already has one. Think about what it is like to be Summer in that house. Her grandfather is the smartest being in the universe. Her brother is Rick's adventure partner, the one Rick chose to bring along on his missions. Her mother is a surgeon who carries the weight of being Rick's daughter. Even her father, for all his flaws, has a clear role as the family's emotional punching bag. Everyone in the Smith house has a thing. Everyone has a place in the family dynamic, except Summer. For a long time, Summer is just there. She is the other kid. The one who was not invited on the adventures. The one Rick did not pick. And that has to sting. Because in a family where the most interesting man in the universe lives in your house, and he chose your younger brother over you, you are going to find a way to feel important somewhere. And for Summer, that somewhere is school. That somewhere is social media. That somewhere is the outside world, where nobody knows that she is the grandchild who was not chosen. So what happens when you take that need away? What happens if Summer does not care about being cool? If she does not care about fitting in, being popular, or having the right image? On the surface, it might seem like not much changes. Summer is not the main character. She is not driving the plot the way Rick or Morty are. But Summer's need to be cool is actually the thing that pulls her into the show's story in a meaningful way. And without it, she drifts into the background and never comes out. Here's what I mean. Summer does not get invited on adventures at first. Rick takes Morty. That is the setup. But Summer keeps pushing her way in. She inserts herself into situations. She shows up when she is not asked. She demands to be included. And the reason she does this is because she cannot stand being left out. Being left out means being ordinary. Being left out means she is just a normal teenage girl in a family full of extraordinary people. And Summer cannot accept that. Her need to be seen, to matter, to be part of something bigger than her high school social circle is what drives her to force her way into Rick's world. Without that drive, Summer stays home. She stays upstairs. She stays on her phone. And she becomes a background character who shows up for family dinners and nothing else. The show actually gives us a really clear picture of what motivates Summer in one of its earlier episodes. There is a moment where Summer finds out the truth about how she was born, that she was an unplanned pregnancy, and that Beth and Jerry almost did not keep her. This hits Summer incredibly hard, because it confirms the thing she has always been afraid of. She was not planned. She was not wanted. She was an accident that happened to work out. And in a family where Morty has a defined role as Rick's sidekick, finding out that she was not even supposed to exist is devastating. It makes her need to be cool, to be relevant, to be noticed, make complete sense. She is not just trying to be popular at school. She is trying to prove that she deserves to exist, that she matters, that her being here was not a mistake. Without that need, Summer does not react to that information the same way. Maybe she processes it and moves on. Maybe she shrugs and says, okay, that is the past. It does not define me. And that would be a mature, healthy response. But it would also rob the show of one of its most emotionally honest moments. Because Summer's pain in that moment is real. It is the kind of pain that a lot of people can relate to. The feeling of being unnecessary. the feeling of being an afterthought. And Summer's response to that pain, which is to try even harder to matter, to push herself into situations where she can prove her worth, is what makes her a compelling character. Without the need to be cool, that pain has nowhere to go. It just sits there. And Summer becomes a character who knows she was not planned and simply does not care. That is not interesting. That is not human. That is just flat. As the show progresses, Summer's need to be cool evolves into something more complex. It stops being just about high school popularity and starts being about proving herself in Rick's world. She wants Rick to see her as capable. She wants to show that she can handle the adventures just as well as Morty can, maybe even better. And honestly, she often does. Summer has shown herself to be tough, smart, and adaptable in situations that would break most people. She handles alien encounters, dangerous missions, and life-threatening scenarios with a surprising amount of composure. And every time she does this, you can see that it is driven by the same core need. She needs to prove she belongs. She needs to be seen as someone worth paying attention to. Rick's relationship with Summer is interesting because of this dynamic. Rick chose Morty as his adventure partner, not Summer. And the show gives a canon reason for this. Rick says that Morty's brainwaves complement his own in a way that helps hide him from detection. That is the practical reason. But the emotional impact of that choice on Summer is real. She was passed over. Her grandfather, the coolest, most powerful person she has ever known, picked her little brother instead of her. And Summer has to live with that every single day. Her need to be cool, to be impressive, to force her way into adventures is at least partly a response to that rejection. She is trying to show Rick that he made the wrong choice, or at least that he should have picked both of them. Without her need to be cool, Summer accepts being passed over. She does not fight for a spot on the adventures. She does not push herself into Rick's world. She just lets Morty be the sidekick and goes about her normal teenage life. And while that might be healthier for her personally, it means we lose all of those moments where Summer proves herself. We lose the Summer who takes charge in dangerous situations. We lose the Summer who stands toe-to-toe with threats that grown adults would run from. We lose the Summer who slowly earns Rick's respect, not because he gave it to her freely, but because she demanded it through her actions. All of that goes away if Summer does not care about being seen as cool, or capable, or worthy. There is also something important about what Summer's need to be cool does for the show's themes. Rick and Morty is a show about identity. It is about who you are when everything is stripped away. Rick is the genius who hides behind his intelligence. Morty is the anxious kid who hides behind his fear. Beth hides behind her father. Jerry hides behind his marriage. And Summer hides behind her image. Her coolness, her confidence, her refusal to seem bothered by anything. That is her armor. Underneath it, she is a teenager who is scared that she does not matter. Scared that her family sees her as optional. Scared that the most interesting person in her life picks someone else. The gap between who Summer pretends to be and who she actually is underneath is one of the most relatable things about her. Every teenager alive knows what it feels like to perform confidence they do not actually have. Summer is that experience turned into a character. Without the need to be cool, there is no armor. There is no performance. And there is no gap between who Summer shows the world and who she really is. That sounds like a good thing, and for a real person, it would be. But for a character on a show that is built around the idea that everyone is hiding something, it makes Summer the only person in the family with nothing to hide. And that makes her the least interesting person in the room. Not because she is a bad character, but because the show needs its characters to have layers. It needs them to have a surface and a depth. Summer's need to be cool is her surface. Her fear of being insignificant is her depth. Remove the surface and the depth has nothing to contrast against. Summer's need to be cool also connects her to the real world in a way that the other characters do not always achieve. Rick's genius, Morty's adventures, Beth's complicated relationship with a dimension-hopping father, these are all heightened and exaggerated. But a teenage girl wanting to be popular, wanting to fit in, wanting to feel like she matters, that is as real as it gets. Every viewer who has ever been a teenager understands Summer on that level. And it gives the show a grounding point. No matter how wild the sci-fi gets, no matter how many dimensions they travel to, there is always Summer back home worrying about something as simple and human as whether people think she is cool. That contrast is valuable. It reminds us that even in a universe of infinite possibilities, the things that hurt the most are still the small, personal, everyday things. Summer without her need to be cool is a Summer who fades away. She does not force her way into the story. She does not fight for screen time. She does not demand to be noticed. And a character who does not demand to be noticed in a show this loud and this chaotic simply gets lost. Her need to be cool is not a flaw she needs to fix. It is the engine that drives her into the heart of the show. Without it, she is just the older sister who stays upstairs. And nobody is making a video essay about that. Summer fights to matter because she is afraid she does not. And that fight is what makes her worth watching. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Summer is fighting to be noticed from inside the Smith family, there's a character from completely outside that family whose single defining trait makes him one of the most fascinating and terrifying creatures in the entire show. Because when you look at Mr. Meeseeks and that unstoppable, all-consuming need to complete a task, removing it does not just change who he is, it raises a question the show barely had to ask. Section 6. Mr. Meeseeks without the compulsion to complete tasks. Mr. Meeseeks is one of the most memorable characters in all of Rick and Morty, and he shows up in one of the show's most beloved episodes. The concept is simple. Rick has a box. You press the button on the box, and a tall, blue, smiling creature pops into existence. That creature is a Mr. Meeseeks. He has one job. You give him a task, he completes it, and then he disappears. He stops existing. That is the deal. That is the entire point of a Mr. Meeseeks. He is born, he helps you, and then he dies. And he is happy about it. He is thrilled about it. Because for a Mr. Meeseeks, existing is pain. He does not want to be here. He does not want to hang around. He wants to do his job and vanish as quickly as possible. The compulsion to complete the task is not just something he feels. It is the only thing he feels. It is his entire reason for being alive. And the moment that task is done, so is he. The episode where we first meet Mr. Meeseeks is a perfect example of how this works. Rick gives the Meeseeks box to the family and tells them they can each summon a Meeseeks to help with something. Summer asks her Meeseeks to make her more popular at school. Beth asks hers to make her a more complete woman. And Jerry asks his to help him take 2 strokes off his golf game. Summer's Meeseeks completes the task pretty quickly. Beth's does too, more or less. But Jerry's Meeseeks cannot do it. Because Jerry is so bad at golf and so resistant to actually changing that the task becomes impossible. And this is where things go dark very fast. The Meeseeks helping Jerry starts to lose his mind. He has been alive for too long. Remember, existing is painful for these creatures. They are not built to last. They are built to pop in, solve a problem, and pop out. But Jerry's task is taking forever, and the Meeseeks is suffering, so he summons another Meeseeks to help, and that one summons another, and another. And soon there is a whole crowd of Meeseeks, all of them trapped in existence because Jerry cannot improve his golf swing. And they start to fall apart. They get angry. They get desperate. They start arguing with each other. They start fighting. Their cheerful smiles and helpful attitudes completely collapse under the weight of being alive for too long without being able to fulfill their purpose. By the end of the episode, the Meeseeks are threatening to kill Jerry because they have decided that if they cannot help him complete the task, maybe eliminating the person who gave them the task will count as a resolution. They go from friendly helpers to a violent mob in the span of a single episode, all because they could not do the one thing they were created to do. That episode is hilarious. It is one of the funniest things the show has ever done. But underneath the comedy, there is something genuinely disturbing about Mr. Meeseeks. And it becomes even more disturbing when you ask the question this video essay is built around. What happens if you take away the compulsion? What happens if a Mr. Meeseeks pops into existence and he does not need to complete a task? He is just here. No mission, no purpose, no built-in expiration date. Just a tall, blue creature who is suddenly alive with no reason to be. The first thing that changes is the most obvious one. Without the compulsion to complete a task, a Mr. Meeseeks has no reason to disappear. He just keeps existing. And based on everything the show has told us about how Meeseeks experience existence, that is a nightmare. They do not enjoy being alive. Every second they spend existing is uncomfortable for them. The show makes this extremely clear. Mr. Meeseeks says it out loud. Existence is pain to a Meeseeks. That is a direct line from the show. It is not hidden or implied. They flat out tell you that being alive hurts. The only thing that makes it bearable is knowing that it will end soon, that the task will be completed and they will get to stop existing. Take away the task, and there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is just the tunnel. Forever. A Meeseeks without a compulsion to complete a task is a creature trapped in eternal suffering with no way out. And that raises a question that is honestly kind of terrifying. What would a Meeseeks do in that situation? The episode already shows us what happens when they are alive for just a few hours too long. They go insane. They become violent. They turn on the people around them. Now imagine that, but with no end in sight. A Meeseeks who knows he will never disappear, who knows there is no task to complete, who knows that the pain of existing is permanent. That creature does not just become dangerous, he becomes something the show has never had to deal with. An immortal being in constant agony with nothing to focus that agony on. In the episode, the Meeseeks channel all of their frustration toward completing the task. Even when they are losing their minds, even when they are screaming and fighting, they are still trying to solve the problem. The compulsion keeps them focused. It keeps them directed. It keeps their madness aimed at something specific. Jerry's golf game in this case. Without that compulsion, the madness has no direction. It is just chaos. A Meeseeks with no task is a Meeseeks with no purpose, and a Meeseeks with no purpose is just raw suffering looking for somewhere to go. There is also something interesting about what the compulsion does to the Meeseeks as a species, if you can even call them that. Every Meeseeks is identical. They all look the same, they all talk the same, they all have the same cheerful attitude. And the reason for that is because they all have the same purpose. They exist to help. That shared purpose is what gives them their identity. It is what makes a Meeseeks a Meeseeks. Without it, what are they? They are not helpers anymore. They are not servants. They are not tools. They are just beings. And beings without purpose tend to start asking questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the point of all this? Those are questions that Meeseeks were never designed to ask. They were designed to skip all of that and go straight to action. The compulsion protects them from the kind of thinking that would break them even faster than existing already does. Think about what the show is really saying with Mr. Meeseeks. On the surface, it is a funny bit about a helpful creature who goes crazy when he cannot finish a job. But underneath that, it is actually one of the show's darkest statements about the nature of existence. Mr. Meeseeks is a creature who was created with a built-in meaning of life. He does not have to search for purpose. He does not have to wonder why he is here. He knows. He was born knowing. And that is what makes him functional. The moment that purpose is threatened, the moment it seems like it might not be fulfilled, he falls apart completely. Now think about that in human terms. How many people spend their entire lives searching for the kind of certainty that a Meeseeks is born with? How many people would give anything to wake up one morning knowing exactly what they are supposed to do and exactly when they get to stop? Mr. Meeseeks has that, and it is still not enough to make existence bearable for him. That is the joke, but it is also the horror. Without the compulsion, the show loses that entire layer of meaning. A Meeseeks who does not need to complete a task is just a weird blue guy standing in your living room. He is not funny because there is no ticking clock. He is not scary because there is no desperation building. He is not meaningful because there is no commentary on purpose and existence. He is just there. And being just there is the one thing a Meeseeks was never designed to be. There is another angle to this that is worth thinking about. The Meeseeks box is one of Rick's inventions. Rick created these creatures. He designed them to pop into existence, solve a problem, and disappear. And he designed them to want that. He built the compulsion into them on purpose. Think about what that says about Rick. He created a species of beings whose entire existence is suffering, and he made them okay with it by giving them a task to focus on. That is incredibly dark when you stop and think about it. Rick essentially created slaves who are happy to be slaves because he programmed them to find relief only in service. The compulsion is not natural, it is engineered. Rick decided that these creatures would suffer, and then he decided that the only way to manage that suffering was to give them a job and a death sentence wrapped into one. Without the compulsion, Rick's invention falls apart. The Meeseeks box does not work. Not because the Meeseeks would not appear, but because they would appear and have no reason to help anyone. Why would they? If they do not feel the drive to complete a task, if their existence is not tied to service, then they are just beings who were brought into a painful existence against their will. And beings in that situation do not usually feel like helping the person who summoned them. They feel angry at the person who summoned them. The Meeseeks box goes from being a convenient tool to being a box that creates angry, suffering creatures in your living room. That is not a gadget you keep in your closet. That is a weapon. The compulsion to complete tasks is what makes Mr. Meeseeks work as a character, as a concept, and as a piece of the show's larger message about existence. It is what makes the episode funny. It is what makes the episode dark. It is what makes us laugh when a Meeseek starts screaming about Jerry's golf swing, and then feel a little uncomfortable when we think about it too hard afterward. The compulsion is the balance point between comedy and horror, between a helpful creature and a tortured soul, between a useful invention and a moral nightmare. Take it away, and the whole thing tips over. Mr. Meeseeks without his compulsion is not a character anymore. He is a tragedy without a punchline. And in a show that is built on finding the joke inside the pain, that is the one thing that does not work. Existence is pain for a Meeseeks. But at least the task gives that pain a finish line. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Mr. Meeseeks is a creature defined by a single program drive, there is a character in this show whose defining trait is something much more personal and much more chosen. Because when you look at Birdperson and that deep, unshakable loyalty that guides every decision he has ever made, you realize that removing it does not just change a character, it erases one of the most meaningful relationships in the entire series. Section 7. Birdperson without his loyalty. Birdperson is one of the most important characters in Rick and Morty, and he barely shows up. That is not an exaggeration. Compared to the main cast, Birdperson has very limited screen time. He appears in a handful of episodes across the entire series, but every single time he shows up, it matters. Every scene he is in carries weight. Every word he says feels important. And the reason for that is simple. Birdperson is the one character in the entire show who is completely and totally loyal. Not loyal in a casual way, not loyal when it is convenient, loyal in the deepest, most absolute sense of the word. Birdperson commits to the people and the causes he believes in, and he does not waver. He does not change his mind. He does not look for an exit when things get hard. Once Birdperson is in, he is in forever. And in a show full of characters who lie, manipulate, run away, and betray each other constantly, that kind of loyalty makes him stand out like nothing else. The most important relationship Birdperson has is with Rick. They go back decades. The show tells us that Rick and Birdperson fought together against the Galactic Federation. They were soldiers together. They bled together. They survived things together that forged a bond most people will never understand. And through all of that, Birdperson stayed loyal to Rick. Not because Rick made it easy. Rick is not the kind of person who makes loyalty easy. He is selfish, reckless, emotionally unavailable, and has a habit of disappearing when people need him most. But Birdperson stayed anyway. He stayed because he believed in Rick. He believed in what they fought for together. And he believed that the bond they shared meant something, even when Rick acted like nothing meant anything. That loyalty is what makes Birdperson's role in the show so powerful. He is Rick's mirror. Not a mirror that reflects who Rick is, but a mirror that reflects who Rick could have been. Birdperson is what a good version of Rick's qualities looks like. He is brave, but he is not reckless. He is strong, but he is not cruel. He is committed, but he is not obsessive. He took the same experiences that turned Rick into a bitter, isolated, self-destructive genius and turned them into something noble. Birdperson came out of the war with his principles intact. Rick did not. And every time the two of them are on screen together, that contrast is doing work. It is showing us the road Rick did not take, the person Rick chose not to be. So what happens if you take Birdperson's loyalty away? What happens if Birdperson is still a warrior, still a veteran, still someone who fought alongside Rick, but he does not have that unbreakable commitment to the people he cares about? The answer is that you lose one of the most emotionally important characters in the entire show. Not because Birdperson does cool things or drives the plot forward in a mechanical way, but because his loyalty is the emotional anchor for some of the show's biggest moments. Without it, those moments collapse. Let us start with the wedding. Birdperson's wedding to Tammy is one of the most shocking episodes in the entire series. The whole thing is set up as a celebration. Rick throws his old friend a wedding. The gang is all there. Squanchy is partying. Everyone is having a good time. It feels like a rare moment of genuine happiness in a show that does not hand out happy moments very often. And then Tammy reveals that she is an agent of the Galactic Federation. She has been undercover the entire time. Her relationship with Birdperson was a lie. And she shoots him right there at the wedding, in front of everyone. Birdperson goes down, and the room explodes into chaos. It is one of the most gut-wrenching moments the show has ever produced. But that moment only works because of Birdperson's loyalty. The reason it hurts so much is because we know that Birdperson committed to Tammy fully and completely. He loved her. He trusted her. He opened himself up to her in a way that someone as steady and principled as Birdperson does not do lightly. When Birdperson gives himself to someone, he gives all of himself. There are no reservations. There is no backup plan. There is no part of him holding back just in case. And Tammy used that against him. She took advantage of the one thing that makes Birdperson who he is. His loyalty became his weakness. And watching that happen is devastating because we know how rare and how genuine that loyalty is. Without his loyalty, Birdperson does not commit to Tammy the same way. Maybe he dates her casually, maybe he keeps his guard up, maybe he notices the red flags that a less trusting person would catch. And if Birdperson does not fully commit to Tammy, the betrayal does not land the same way. It becomes a plot twist without emotional weight. It becomes something that happens to a character instead of something that destroys a character. The wedding scene is not just shocking because of what Tammy does. It is heartbreaking because of who she does it to. And who Birdperson is, at his core, is a person defined by loyalty. Take that away and the whole scene falls apart. Then there is what happens after the wedding. Birdperson is turned into Phoenix-person. The Galactic Federation takes his body and rebuilds him as a cyborg, a weapon they can control. And when Rick eventually encounters Phoenix-person, it is one of the most painful things Rick has ever had to face. Because Phoenix-person is Birdperson without everything that made him Birdperson. He is the body without the soul. He has the strength, but not the loyalty. He has the fighting skills, but not the principles. He looks at Rick and there is no recognition, no bond, no decades of shared history behind his eyes. He is just a machine following orders. And that is what makes it so devastating for Rick. The one person who was always loyal to him, the one person who never left, who never gave up on him, has been turned into something that does not even know who he is. That entire arc, from the wedding to Phoenix-person to Rick's attempts to get his friend back, is built on Birdperson's loyalty. Every piece of it depends on us knowing and feeling how deep that loyalty ran. If Birdperson was just a casual friend, just a guy Rick used to know, then losing him is sad, but it is not earth-shattering. Rick has lost plenty of people. He has left entire dimensions behind without looking back. But Birdperson is different, because Birdperson chose to stay when everyone else left or was pushed away. And Rick, losing that, losing the one person whose loyalty he never had to question, is what gives this storyline its power. Birdperson's loyalty also matters because of what it tells us about Rick. Rick does not have many real relationships. He has people he uses, people he tolerates, and people he keeps at arm's length. But Birdperson is one of the very few people Rick genuinely cares about. And the reason Rick cares about him is because Birdperson earned it through loyalty. Not through being useful, not through being smart, not through having something Rick needs, just through being there, consistently, reliably, without asking for anything in return. That is something Rick has almost never experienced from anyone else, and it is something Rick does not know how to deal with. There are moments in the show where Birdperson tries to talk to Rick honestly about his life, about his drinking, about his self-destructive behavior. And Rick does what Rick always does. He deflects. He makes a joke. He changes the subject. But he does not leave. He does not cut Birdperson off. He does not push him away the way he pushes everyone else away. And that tells us that Birdperson's loyalty has broken through Rick's walls in a way that almost nothing else has. Without that loyalty, Rick has no reason to keep Birdperson in his life. Think about it. Rick does not maintain relationships out of obligation or sentimentality. He maintains them because they serve him in some way, or because the other person is so relentlessly present that Rick cannot shake them. Birdperson is the second kind. He is the friend who keeps showing up, who keeps calling, who keeps being there even when Rick does not deserve it. Without that, Birdperson is just another person from Rick's past, another name on a long list of people Rick used to know. And Rick does not go to war to save people he used to know. He does not spend episodes trying to bring back someone he used to hang out with. The reason Rick fights so hard to get Birdperson back, the reason it matters so much to him, is because Birdperson's loyalty was one of the few pure things in Rick's life. Losing it is not just losing a friend. It is losing proof that Rick is capable of being loved. There is something else that Birdperson's loyalty does for the show on a bigger level. It provides hope. That might sound like a strange thing to say about a character who gets shot at his own wedding and turned into a cyborg. But in a show that is constantly telling us that nothing matters, that the universe is cold and indifferent, that relationships are temporary and love is a chemical reaction, Birdperson is the counter-argument. He is the character who says no. Things do matter. People do matter. Loyalty is real and it means something. He does not say this with big speeches or dramatic moments. He says it by simply being loyal, by showing up, by staying. In a show full of nihilism, Birdperson is the quiet case for meaning, and that makes him essential. Without his loyalty, the show loses that counter-argument. It becomes a universe where Rick's worldview is completely correct. Nothing matters, no one stays, and every relationship is eventually betrayed or abandoned. Birdperson's loyalty is the show's way of saying, maybe Rick is wrong. Maybe some people do stick around. Maybe some bonds are real. Take that away, and the show becomes darker in a way that is not interesting or compelling. It just becomes hopeless. And a show that is purely hopeless is not one that people connect with the way they connect with Rick and Morty. Birdperson without his loyalty is just a tall bird guy who fought in a war. He is not a mirror for Rick. He is not a source of hope. He is not the emotional anchor that makes the wedding and Phoenix Person arcs some of the best storytelling in the entire series. He is just a side character with no reason to exist. And in a show that is asking whether anything matters, the character who answers yes by simply refusing to leave is more important than he has ever gotten credit for. Birdperson's loyalty is not just his defining trait. It is his gift to a show that desperately needs someone to believe in something. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Birdperson represents loyalty pushed to its most noble extreme, there is another character in this show who takes a single trait and pushes it in the complete opposite direction. Because when you look at evil Morty and that cold, patient, calculated ambition driving every single thing he does, you realize that removing it does not just change a villain, It erases the most dangerous person in the entire multiverse. Section 8. Evil Morty without his ambition. Evil Morty is the most terrifying character in Rick and Morty. Not because he is physically powerful, not because he has weapons or armies or alien technology at his fingertips. He is terrifying because he is patient. He is terrifying because he has a plan. And he is terrifying because that plan works. In a show full of geniuses and monsters and interdimensional threats, the most dangerous person in the entire multiverse is a teenage boy with an eye patch who decided he wanted out. That is what makes Evil Morty so special. He is not reacting to things. He is not stumbling through chaos the way our Morty does. He is not being dragged along by a Rick. He is the one driving. He is the one in control. And every single thing he does, from his very first appearance to his final escape, is driven by one thing: ambition. Cold, calculated, long-game ambition that never wavers and never stops. The first time we meet Evil Morty, the show does not even tell us who he really is. He appears to be a victim. There is a Rick who has been kidnapping Mortys from across the multiverse, torturing them, using them as a shield. Our Rick and Morty get pulled into the investigation. The Citadel of Ricks, which is the governing body of all the Ricks across every dimension, is trying to figure out who this evil Rick is and why he is doing this. And at the end of the episode, we find out the truth. The Rick who was doing all of this was being controlled the entire time. He was a puppet. And the one pulling the strings was not another Rick. It was a Morty. Evil Morty. He was standing right there in the crowd of rescued Mortys, hiding in plain sight, and nobody suspected him. Because nobody ever suspects a Morty of being the one in charge. That reveal is one of the best moments in the entire series. And it works because of what it tells us about Evil Morty's ambition. This is not someone who acts on impulse. This is not someone who got angry and lashed out. This is someone who built an entire operation. He found a Rick, figured out how to control him, used him to kidnap and torture other Mortys, and set the whole thing up in a way that would never point back to him. And when it was all over, he just walked away. No speech. No victory lap. No dramatic reveal to the people he outsmarted. He just disappeared into the crowd and moved on to the next phase of whatever he was planning. That level of patience, that level of discipline, that level of ambition is something no other Morty in the entire multiverse has ever shown. And it is what makes him dangerous. So what happens if you take that ambition away? What happens if Evil Morty is still smart? Still aware that the system is rigged against Mortys, still frustrated by the way Ricks treat Mortys across the multiverse, but he just does not have the drive to do anything about it. The answer is simple and kind of sad. He becomes just another Morty. He becomes one of the thousands of Mortys we see at the Citadel, going through the motions, living in the shadow of their Ricks, accepting the way things are because they do not believe they can change it. Evil Morty without ambition is a Morty who knows the truth but does not act on it. And a Morty who knows the truth but does nothing is not a threat. He is just depressed. That matters because Evil Morty's ambition is what separates him from every other Morty in existence. The show makes it very clear that Mortys are not supposed to be in charge. The entire structure of the Citadel is built on the idea that Ricks are the smart ones and Mortys are the sidekicks. Mortys go to school. Mortys follow orders. Mortys do what their Ricks tell them to do. The system is designed to keep Mortys in their place, and every single Morty at the Citadel accepts this. They might not like it, they might complain about it, but they accept it. Every Morty, except one. Evil Morty looks at the system and says, "No, I am not going to accept this. I am going to beat this. I am going to take control of this entire structure, and then I am going to leave it behind." And that refusal to accept his assigned place in the universe is pure ambition. It is the decision to be more than what you were designed to be. The Citadel episodes are some of the richest episodes in the entire show, and Evil Morty is at the center of them. When he shows up at the Citadel again, he does something nobody thought was possible. He runs for president. A Morty running for president of the Citadel of Ricks. The idea itself is absurd. It is like a chess pawn announcing it wants to be the player moving the pieces. And the Ricks do not take him seriously. They laugh it off. They assume it is a joke or a stunt. because in their minds, a Morty could never actually lead. A Morty does not have what it takes, but evil Morty does have what it takes. He campaigns, he gives speeches, he connects with the Morty population who are desperate for someone who understands what it is like to be treated as less than. He tells them what they want to hear, but more importantly, he means enough of it to be convincing. And he wins. Evil Morty becomes the president of the Citadel. A Morty in charge of all the Ricks. And the Ricks who laughed at him are now answering to him. That is ambition paying off in the most dramatic way possible. But here's the thing that makes Evil Morty truly special. Winning the election was not his goal. It was a step. Most characters in most shows would treat becoming the leader of an entire interdimensional society as the end game. That is the top. That is the peak. You have won. But for Evil Morty, it was just another move in a much longer game. He did not want to rule the Citadel. He wanted to use the Citadel. He wanted its resources, its technology, its power. And he wanted all of that for one purpose: to escape the central finite curve. The central finite curve is one of the most important concepts in the entire show. It is essentially a barrier that separates the dimensions where Rick is the smartest person in the universe from the dimensions where he is not. The Ricks built it. They created a wall around the section of the multiverse where they are always on top, where they are always the most powerful, where no one can challenge them. And every Morty, every Beth, every Jerry, every person in every dimension inside the central finite curve is living in a reality that was designed to keep Rick at the top of the food chain. Evil Morty figured this out. He understood that the game was rigged at the most fundamental level. And his ambition was not just to win the rigged game, it was to leave the game entirely. Without that ambition, Evil Morty never figures out what the central finite curve is. Or maybe he does figure it out, but he does not care enough to do anything about it. He knows the truth, shrugs, and goes back to his life. And if that happens, the Citadel never falls. The central finite curve is never broken. The entire multiverse stays exactly the way the Ricks designed it to be. Evil Morty's ambition is not just his personal trait. It is the force that reshapes the entire universe of the show. Without it, the status quo holds forever. And the status quo in Rick and Morty is a system built on exploitation and control. Evil Morty is the only person who had both the awareness to see the cage and the ambition to break out of it. The scene where Evil Morty finally breaks through the central finite curve is one of the most visually striking moments in the entire series. He has torn the Citadel apart. He has used its technology to punch a hole through the barrier. Ricks and Mortys are dying all around him. And he does not care. He walks through the chaos without flinching. He steps over the bodies without looking down. He gets into his little ship and he flies through the gap in the curve, leaving everything behind. The Citadel, the Ricks, the Mortys, the entire rigged system. He just leaves. And as he flies away, there is this incredible shot of him alone in his ship, finally free, heading into a part of the multiverse where Rick is not the smartest person alive, where the rules are different, where a Morty might actually have a chance. That moment is powerful because of everything that came before it. Every scheme, every manipulation, every patient step of Evil Morty's plan led to that single moment. And it only happened because his ambition never flickered. Not once. Not when the Ricks underestimated him. Not when the other Mortys doubted him. Not when the obstacles seemed impossible. He just kept going, kept planning, kept pushing. And eventually, he won. Not in the way heroes usually win, with celebration and applause and a happy ending. He won quietly, alone, leaving destruction behind him. But he won. Without ambition, that scene does not exist. None of it does. There is no campaign. There is no presidency. There is no breaking the curve. There is just a Morty who is slightly smarter than the others, living at the Citadel, going to Morty school, doing what he is told. He might be angry. He might be aware that the system is unfair. But awareness without ambition is just frustration. It does not change anything. It does not build anything. It does not tear down the walls that are keeping you trapped. Evil Morty without ambition is the saddest version of this character, not because he does not know the truth, but because he knows it and cannot be bothered to act on it. The show uses Evil Morty to ask one of its most important questions. What happens when the person at the bottom of the power structure refuses to stay there? What happens when someone who was designed to be a sidekick decides to become the main character of their own story? The answer, according to Rick and Morty, is that everything changes. The whole structure breaks, the walls come down, the people in charge lose control, and the person who was never supposed to matter ends up being the one who mattered most. Evil Morty's ambition is not just a character trait. It is a revolution. It is the show's way of saying that the systems we accept as permanent are only permanent because nobody has been ambitious enough to break them yet. And when someone finally is, when someone has the patience and the intelligence and the sheer stubborn refusal to accept their place, everything we thought was solid turns out to be fragile. Evil Morty without his ambition is nobody. And that is exactly the point. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Evil Morty is a character defined by the cold, deliberate choice to act, there is another character in this show whose defining trait is the complete opposite of calculation. Because when you look at Squanchy, and that wild, uncontrollable recklessness that explodes out of him in every scene he is in, you realize that removing it does not just calm him down, it takes away the very thing that made him matter when it counted most. Section 9. Squanchy without his recklessness. Squanchy is one of those characters who does not need a lot of screen time to make a big impression. He shows up, he is loud, he is wild, he is out of control, and then he is gone. That is Squanchy. He is a small, cat-like alien who is part of Rick's old crew. He fought alongside Rick and Birdperson against the Galactic Federation. He has been through wars and battles and years of chaos. And through all of it, the one thing that defines him more than anything else is his recklessness. Squanchy does not think before he acts. He does not weigh his options. He does not sit down and consider the consequences of what he is about to do. He just goes. Full speed, no brakes, no looking back. Whether it is a party or a fight or a life-threatening situation, Squanchy approaches everything the same way, with total, unfiltered, reckless energy. The show introduces Squanchy as a party animal. That is his surface-level identity. He loves to party. He uses the word squanch constantly, inserting it into every sentence in ways that can mean almost anything depending on the context. He is the friend who shows up and immediately turns the energy up to the maximum. When Rick and his old friends get together, Squanchy is the one bouncing off the walls, the one who cannot sit still, the one who is always looking for the next source of excitement. He is fun, he is chaotic. He is the kind of character who makes you laugh just by being on screen because his energy is so unpredictable. But here's the thing about Squanchy that is easy to miss if you only think of him as the party guy. His recklessness is not just about having a good time. It runs much deeper than that. Squanchy's recklessness is what makes him brave. It is what makes him loyal in action, not just in words. It is what makes him the kind of friend who does not just say he will be there for you, but actually throws himself into danger without a second thought when you need him. And the show proves this in one of the most intense moments Squanchy has ever had on screen. At Birdperson's wedding, when Tammy reveals herself as an agent of the Galactic Federation and everything falls apart, Squanchy does something incredible. The room is chaos. People are being shot. The Federation soldiers are everywhere. It is a massacre. And Squanchy, this little cat creature who we have mostly seen partying and goofing around, transforms. He has some kind of ability to bulk up, to grow massive and powerful, and he uses it. He throws himself into the fight against the Federation soldiers. He does not run. He does not hide. He does not calculate his odds or figure out an escape plan. He just fights. He fights so that the others can get away. He fights knowing that he is probably not going to make it out. And as far as the show tells us, for a long time after that episode, Squanchy does not make it out. His fate is left unknown. He just disappears into the battle, fighting to his last breath so that his friends have a chance to survive. That moment is the most important thing Squanchy has ever done on the show. and it only happens because of his recklessness. A careful Squanchy, a cautious Squanchy. A Squanchy who thinks things through does not throw himself into a losing fight. A rational person in that situation looks around, sees that they are outnumbered, sees that the Federation has the upper hand, and runs. A rational person prioritizes their own survival. But Squanchy is not rational. He never has been. And his inability to think before he acts, the same trait that makes him wild and chaotic at parties, is the exact same trait that makes him a hero at the wedding. His recklessness does not change based on the situation. It is always there, always running, always pushing him forward. At a party, it pushes him to be the loudest person in the room. In a battle, it pushes him to fight when fighting makes no sense. So what happens when you take that recklessness away? What happens if Squanchy is still a veteran, still one of Rick's old friends, still someone who has been through wars and chaos, but he is careful, he is measured, he is cautious. He thinks before he acts and only commits to things when the odds are in his favor. The first thing that changes is the party energy. Squanchy without recklessness is not fun anymore, not in the way the show needs him to be. His entire personality is built on being over the top. Every scene he is in crackles with energy because you never know what he is going to do next. He might say something inappropriate. He might break something. He might do something so wild that it derails whatever was happening around him. That unpredictability is what makes Squanchy entertaining. A cautious Squanchy is a Squanchy who sits in the corner and watches. A Squanchy who waits to see what everyone else is doing before he joins in. That is not Squanchy. That is just a cat sitting at a party. But the party stuff is the small part. The big part is the wedding. Without recklessness, Squanchy does not fight at Birdperson's wedding. He just does not. When the Federation attacks, a careful Squanchy looks at the situation and sees that it is hopeless. There are too many soldiers, the enemy is too organized. Fighting back is suicide. And a careful Squanchy, one who weighs his options and thinks about his own survival, does what most people would do in that situation. He runs. He gets out. He saves himself. And Rick and whoever else survives the initial attack are on their own. That changes everything about that episode. Squanchy's sacrifice, or at least his willingness to sacrifice, is one of the emotional pillars of that whole sequence. The wedding already has Birdperson getting shot. It already has Tammy's betrayal. It already has Rick losing his best friend. But on top of all that, Rick also loses Squanchy. He loses two of his closest friends in one night. And Squanchy's loss hits differently than Birdperson's because Squanchy chose to fight. Nobody asked him to. Nobody ordered him to stay behind. He just did it because that is who he is. His recklessness made the choice for him before his brain could talk him out of it. And there is something beautiful about that, even in the middle of all that horror. The guy who could never control himself, who always acted on impulse, who never once in his life paused to think about what he was doing, used that exact quality to do the bravest thing any character has done in the entire show. Without recklessness, you lose that. You lose the sacrifice. You lose the heroism. You lose the idea that the same trait that makes someone chaotic and unreliable in everyday life can also make them the most dependable person in the room when everything falls apart. That is one of the most interesting things the show does with Squanchy. It takes a character who seems like pure comic relief, a party animal with no depth, and reveals that the trait we laughed at is the same trait that makes him a hero. The recklessness is not two different things depending on the situation. It is one thing expressed in two different ways. And the show trusts the audience to see that connection. Squanchy's recklessness also matters because of what it tells us about Rick's choice in friends. Rick surrounds himself with people who match his energy. Birdperson is the calm, loyal counterbalance, but Squanchy is the other side. Squanchy is the friend who says yes to everything. The friend who does not ask questions. The friend who is always ready to go, no matter where, no matter what, no matter how dangerous. Rick needs that kind of person in his life, because Rick himself is reckless. Rick jumps into situations without thinking all the time. He builds things without considering the consequences. He drags his family into chaos because it is more interesting than being safe. Squanchy is the friend who validates that lifestyle. He is the proof that Rick is not the only person in the universe who lives that way. And having that validation matters to Rick, even if he would never admit it. Without Squanchy's recklessness, that dynamic disappears. A cautious Squanchy would push back on Rick's plans. He would ask questions. He would say, maybe we should think about this first. And Rick does not want to hear that. Rick already has Birdperson for the thoughtful, measured perspective. He already has Morty for the anxious, worried perspective. What Rick wants from Squanchy is someone who matches his energy without question. Someone who is just as willing to run into the fire as Rick is. Take that away, and Squanchy becomes redundant in Rick's life. He is just another person telling Rick to slow down. And Rick already ignores everyone who tells him to slow down. He does not need one more. There is also something to be said about what Squanchy's recklessness does for the show's tone. Rick and Morty is a show that balances darkness and comedy in a way that very few other shows manage. It can go from a deeply philosophical moment about the meaninglessness of existence to a fart joke in the span of 30 seconds. And characters like Squanchy are a big part of how it pulls that off. Squanchy's reckless energy brings levity to heavy situations. His inability to take anything seriously, even things that are clearly serious, gives the audience permission to laugh in moments where they might otherwise feel uncomfortable. He is the show's pressure valve. When things get too dark, too intense, too philosophical, Squanchy shows up and does something wild, and the tension breaks. Without that reckless energy, the show loses one of its most reliable tools for managing tone. And let us not forget the emotional weight of not knowing what happened to Squanchy after the wedding. For a long time, the show leaves his fate completely unknown. We do not know if he survived. We do not know if the Federation captured him. We do not know if he is dead. And that uncertainty carries emotional weight, specifically because of who Squanchy is. If a careful, measured character went missing after a battle, we might assume they found a way to survive. They probably had an escape plan. They probably calculated their exit before things went bad. But Squanchy did not have an exit plan. Squanchy threw himself into a fight he probably could not win, because that is what his recklessness demanded. And knowing that about him makes the uncertainty worse. Because we know that Squanchy did not hold back. We know he gave everything he had. And the question of whether everything he had was enough to keep him alive is a question that carries real weight. Squanchy without his recklessness is a character who does not stand out. He does not bring energy to scenes. He does not provide comic relief. He does not throw himself into hopeless battles for his friends. He does not validate Rick's chaotic lifestyle. He does not serve as the show's pressure valve in dark moments. He is just a quiet, cautious alien who used to know Rick. And in a show this big, this loud, this full of characters competing for attention, a quiet and cautious character gets forgotten. That is not a failure of the character. That is just the reality of existing in a universe where everything is turned up to 11. You either match that energy or you disappear into the background. Squanchy's recklessness is not a flaw he needs to fix. It is the fire that makes him burn bright. And when the moment came that mattered most, that fire is what he gave to the people he loved. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Squanchy burns hot and fast and loud, there is a character in this show who operates on the complete opposite frequency. Because when you look at Mr. Poopy Butthole and that warm, unbreakable, almost suspicious positivity that defines every single moment he is on screen, you start to wonder what happens when you take away the one thing that makes him feel like a friend. Section 10. Mr. Poopy Butthole without his positivity. Mr. Poopy Butthole is one of the strangest characters in Rick and Morty. And that is saying a lot for a show that has talking pickles, interdimensional cable, and a planet made entirely of screaming suns. But Mr. Poopy Butthole is strange in a different way. He is not strange because of what he does. He is strange because of how he makes you feel. Every single time Mr. Poopy Butthole shows up on screen, he is warm. He is kind. He is happy to see you. He talks to the audience like they are his best friends. He calls people by little nicknames. He is supportive and encouraging and genuinely excited about life. In a show that is constantly telling us that the universe is cold and meaningless and nothing matters, Mr. Poopy Butthole walks in with a smile and acts like everything is going to be okay. And the weird part is, you believe him. Even though he is a small yellow creature with a top hat whose name is literally Mr. Poopy Butthole, you believe him when he says things are going to be all right. That is the power of his positivity. It is so consistent, so genuine, so unbreakable that it cuts through all the cynicism the show throws at you. The first time we really meet Mr. Poopy Butthole in a meaningful way is in the episode where parasites have invaded the Smith house. These parasites disguise themselves as people the family knows and loves. They implant fake memories to make the family believe they have always been around. The trick is that the parasites can only create positive memories. They cannot make you remember a bad time with them. So the family figures out that the way to identify the parasites is to check if you have any negative memories of someone. If all your memories of a person are good, they are probably a parasite. And this is where things get really interesting with Mr. Poopy Butthole, because the family cannot think of a single bad memory involving him. Every memory they have of Mr. Poopy Butthole is positive. He has always been kind. He has always been supportive. He has always been there with a smile and a warm word. So by the logic of the episode, he should be a parasite. Beth comes to this conclusion. She picks up a gun and she shoots him, right there in the living room. She shoots Mr. Poopy Butthole because his relentless positivity makes him look exactly like one of the fake parasites. He is too good, too nice, too consistently warm. No real person is like that, right? Real people have bad days. Real people get angry. Real people let you down. But Mr. Poopy Butthole never does any of that. So Beth shoots him. And then the show reveals that he was real. Mr. Poopy Butthole is not a parasite. He is a real person. He was genuinely that positive, that kind, that consistently warm. Beth shot an innocent person because his positivity was so extreme that it seemed fake. That is one of the darkest and most brilliant things the show has ever done. It takes a character whose defining trait is being relentlessly good and turns that trait into the thing that almost gets him killed. The show is asking a brutal question. In a world full of deception and manipulation, is genuine kindness so rare that we literally cannot tell it apart from a lie? So what happens when you take Mr. Poopy Butthole's positivity away? What happens if he is just a regular guy? Not unusually happy, not unusually kind, not unusually warm, just normal. Sometimes he is in a good mood, sometimes he is not. Sometimes he is supportive, sometimes he is distant. He is just a person with regular emotions who has regular days. The first thing that changes is the Parasite episode loses its entire punch. The reason that episode works, the reason Beth shooting Mr. Poopy Butthole is so shocking and so memorable, is because his positivity is what puts the target on his back. If Mr. Poopy Butthole has bad days, if the family can remember times when he was grumpy or rude or just not in the mood to be friendly, then they know he is real. Beth has a negative memory of him. She crosses him off the list, and he never gets shot. He just stands there in the living room while the family hunts the real parasites. He is safe. He is fine. And the most iconic moment of the entire episode never happens. The show needs Mr. Poopy Butthole to be impossibly, suspiciously positive for that moment to work. His kindness is the setup, and the tragedy is the punchline. But the Parasite episode is just the beginning of Mr. Poopy Butthole's story. What happens after he gets shot is where his positivity becomes even more important. The show follows Mr. Poopy Butthole's recovery and post-credit scenes across multiple episodes. And these scenes are some of the most quietly devastating things in the entire show. We see him in the hospital, going through physical therapy, learning to walk again after being shot. And then we see him later, and his life has changed. He is using a cane. He is alone in his apartment. Time passes, and we see him going through difficult things. We see moments that suggest he is struggling. His life takes turns that are clearly painful. And through all of it, even when things are clearly hard, Mr. Poopy Butthole maintains his warmth. He still talks to the camera. he still addresses the audience with affection. He still acts like he cares about the people watching. Even as his life gets harder, even as the show reveals that being shot by Beth had real, lasting consequences for him, he keeps that core of positivity. It might be dimmer, it might be strained, but it is still there. And that consistency is what makes those scenes so powerful. Because we are watching a character who has every reason to be bitter, every reason to be angry, every reason to give up on being kind. And he just does not. He keeps going. He keeps being warm. He keeps smiling, even when the smile is clearly harder to hold. Without his positivity, those post-credit scenes are just sad. They are just a guy who got shot and whose life got worse. There is no contrast. There is no tension between what is happening to him and how he is responding to it. The power of Mr. Poopy Butthole's story is in the gap between his circumstances and his attitude. Bad things happen to him. His life falls apart in ways that are clearly painful, and he stays positive. That gap is where all the emotion lives. It is what makes you root for him. It is what makes you feel something when you see him struggling. Because you know that this is a person who will not let the world make him mean. He will not let his pain turn him cruel. He just keeps being who he is, no matter what. A Mr. Poopy Butthole without positivity does not generate that emotion. He gets shot, his life gets hard, and he responds the way most people would. He gets angry, he gets depressed, he gets bitter. And while that is realistic, it is also ordinary. It is expected. There is nothing surprising or compelling about a person who has a hard life and becomes negative because of it. That is just how life works for most people. What makes Mr. Poopy Butthole special is that he breaks that pattern. He refuses to let his circumstances dictate his attitude. And in a show where almost every character eventually gives in to cynicism and despair, his refusal to do the same is not just unique, it is revolutionary. There is something else that Mr. Poopy Butthole's positivity does that no other character on the show can do. It connects the show to the audience in a personal way. Mr. Poopy Butthole talks directly to the viewers. He breaks the fourth wall. He looks at the camera and he speaks to you like you are his friend. And because he is so warm, so genuine, so consistently kind, it actually works. You feel like he is talking to you. You feel like he cares. In a show that is constantly reminding you that the universe is vast and indifferent, and you are a tiny speck that does not matter, Mr. Poopy Butthole looks you in the eye and says, "Hey, I see you, and I am glad you are here." That is a powerful thing for a show to have. It is a direct emotional bridge between the screen and the person watching. And it only works because of the positivity. A neutral Mr. Poopy Butthole, one who sometimes cares and sometimes does not build that bridge. He is just a character on a show. The warmth is what makes it feel personal. And here is what might be the most important thing about Mr. Poopy Butthole's positivity. It serves as a counterpoint to Rick's worldview. Rick believes that caring is a weakness. Rick believes that the universe is meaningless and that investing emotionally in anything is a waste of time. Rick uses his intelligence to justify his coldness. He wraps his inability to connect with people in philosophical arguments about the pointlessness of everything. And for most of the show, Rick's worldview goes mostly unchallenged. The show seems to agree with him more often than not. Bad things happen. Good intentions lead to disaster. Love leads to pain. The evidence piles up in Rick's favor. But then there is Mr. Poopy Butthole, a character who has been through genuine suffering, who was shot by someone he trusted, whose life fell apart in ways that were not his fault, who has every justification in the world to adopt Rick's worldview and say nothing matters and caring is pointless. And he does not. He just keeps being kind. He just keeps being positive. He just keeps caring about people, even though caring has cost him dearly. And by simply existing, by simply being who he is in the face of everything the show throws at him, Mr. Poopy Butthole becomes the strongest argument against Rick's philosophy. He does not make speeches about it. He does not debate Rick. He does not try to prove anyone wrong. He just lives his life with warmth and kindness and lets that speak for itself. Without his positivity, the show loses that argument. It loses the one character who proves that you can go through terrible things and still choose to be good. It loses the emotional bridge to the audience. It loses the contrast that makes his post-credit scenes so moving. And it loses the quiet, persistent challenge to Rick's belief that nothing matters. Mr. Poopy Butthole's positivity is not just a personality trait. It is the show's secret weapon. It is the thing that keeps Rick and Morty from becoming a show that is only about darkness and nihilism. Because as long as Mr. Poopy Butthole is out there smiling through the pain, talking to the camera with genuine warmth, there is at least one voice in the entire universe of the show saying that maybe things can be okay. Maybe kindness is not stupid. Maybe caring is not a weakness. Maybe the universe is cold, but the people in it do not have to be. Mr. Poopy Butthole without his positivity is just another casualty of a cruel universe. But with it, he is proof that the universe does not get to decide who you are. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Mr. Poopy Butthole stands as one small, warm voice against the darkness, there is an entire society in this show that was built on a shared trait so powerful it shaped the lives of thousands. Because when you look at the Citadel Ricks in that, collective, unshakable arrogance that holds their whole world together, you realize that removing it does not just change a group of characters, it collapses an entire civilization. Section 11. The Citadel Ricks without their arrogance. The Citadel of Ricks is one of the most ambitious things the show has ever created. It is an entire city, an entire civilization, built by and for Ricks from across the multiverse. Thousands of Ricks from thousands of different dimensions came together and said, "We are the smartest beings in existence, so let us build a society where we are in charge." And that is exactly what they did. The Citadel has its own government, its own economy, its own social structure, its own police force, its own schools. It is a fully functioning society. And every single piece of it, from the highest levels of government to the lowest levels of labor, is built on one shared belief: that Ricks are better than everyone else. That is the arrogance. It is not individual. It is collective. It is baked into the foundation of everything the Citadel is. Every law, every institution, every rule, every social norm, all of it comes back to the same idea. Ricks are the smartest, Ricks are the most capable, and Ricks deserve to be on top. The Citadel episodes are some of the richest and most detailed episodes in the entire series. The show takes real time to explore what this society actually looks like. And what it looks like is a place that mirrors the worst parts of the real world, but with Ricks and Mortys instead of regular people. There are rich Ricks and poor Ricks. There are Ricks in positions of power and Ricks who work in factories. There are Ricks who make the rules and Ricks who get crushed by them. The Citadel is not a paradise just because it is full of geniuses. It is a deeply unequal, deeply corrupt, deeply broken place. And the thing holding it all together, the glue that keeps the whole structure from being questioned, is the shared arrogance of its Rick population. Here is how the arrogance works. Every Rick at the Citadel, whether he is a council member or a factory worker, shares the fundamental belief that he is superior to non-Ricks. He might be at the bottom of Rick society, but he is still a Rick. And being a Rick, in his mind, means he is still better than every Morty, every Beth, every Jerry, every non-Rick being in the multiverse. This belief is what prevents the lower-class Ricks from questioning the system. They might hate the Ricks above them, but they still believe in the idea that Ricks as a group are special. They still buy into the hierarchy because the hierarchy puts them above Mortys. And as long as there is someone beneath them, they can tolerate being beneath someone else. That is how the arrogance functions as a tool of control. It is the thing that keeps the Ricks from revolting against their own system. And then there are the Mortys. The Citadel is full of Mortys. They live there, they go to school there, they work there, but they are not equal citizens. The entire structure of the Citadel treats Mortys as less than. They are sidekicks. They are accessories. They are the thing every Rick is supposed to have, like a tool or a pet. The Mortys at the Citadel are assigned to Ricks. They go to Morty school, where they are taught how to be good sidekicks. They are not encouraged to think for themselves. They are not given opportunities to lead. They are kept in their place by a system that was designed by Ricks who believed that Mortys exist to serve them. That is the arrogance at its most obvious and its most harmful. It is not just self-confidence, it is the belief that an entire group of people are lesser, and the construction of a society that enforces that belief at every level. So what happens when you take the arrogance away? What happens if the Ricks at the Citadel wake up one morning and they no longer believe they are better than everyone else? They are still geniuses, they still have the intelligence, they still have the inventions and the technology and the scientific knowledge, but they no longer believe that being smart makes them superior. They no longer look at Mortys and see lesser beings. They no longer look at each other and see members of an elite class. They just see people. Smart people, yes. Capable people, sure. But not inherently better people. The first thing that happens is the Citadel's social structure collapses. Everything about the way the Citadel is organized depends on the belief that Ricks belong on top. The government is run by Ricks because Ricks believe only Ricks should govern. The economy exploits Mortys because Ricks believe Mortys are expendable. The schools teach Mortys to be obedient because Ricks believe that is a Morty's proper role. All of that falls apart when the arrogance disappears. If Ricks no longer believe they are inherently superior, then there is no justification for keeping Mortys at the bottom. There is no justification for a Rick-only government. There is no justification for any of the systems that keep the Citadel running the way it does. The whole thing has to be rebuilt from scratch. And rebuilding an entire civilization is not something that happens smoothly. The Citadel episodes actually show us what happens when the system starts to crack, and it is not pretty. When Evil Morty runs for president, he exposes the rot at the heart of the Citadel. He points out the inequality. He points out the exploitation. He points out that the Ricks in charge are not governing for the benefit of everyone. They are governing for the benefit of themselves. And the Mortys at the Citadel hear this, and they respond. They vote for him. They choose a Morty over a Rick because someone finally said out loud what they all already knew. The system is rigged. And the Ricks let it happen because their arrogance blinded them to the possibility that a Morty could actually win. They did not take Evil Morty seriously because they could not imagine a Morty being a real threat. That is arrogance in action, and it cost them everything. Without their arrogance, the Ricks would have taken Evil Morty seriously from the start. They would have seen a Morty running for president, and instead of laughing, they would have paid attention. They would have recognized the danger. They would have responded with intelligence instead of dismissal. And Evil Morty's entire path to power might have been blocked before it even started. The arrogance is what created the blind spot that Evil Morty exploited. Without it, there is no blind spot. And without the blind spot, there might be no Evil Morty presidency. There might be no fall of the Citadel. There might be no breaking of the central finite curve. The arrogance of the Ricks is not just a personality trait. It is the flaw that brings down their entire civilization. But here is where it gets complicated. Without the arrogance, the Citadel might not exist in the first place. Think about what it takes to build something like the Citadel. You need thousands of versions of the same person to come together and agree on something. You need them to cooperate, to pool their resources, to build institutions and infrastructure. Ricks are not team players. Our Rick has made that very clear. He hates the Citadel. He refuses to be part of it. He sees it as a contradiction, a bunch of Ricks who claim to be independent thinkers, choosing to conform and live together. And he has a point. Ricks are naturally independent. They are loners. They do not join groups. So what brought thousands of them together to build a city? The arrogance. The shared belief that Ricks are special is the one thing powerful enough to overcome their natural independence. It is the one thing all Ricks have in common, no matter what dimension they come from. They all believe they are the smartest. They all believe they are exceptional. And when they found each other across the multiverse, that shared belief became the foundation for a shared identity. We are Ricks. We are the best. We deserve our own place. The Citadel exists because arrogance gave these fiercely independent individuals a reason to come together. Without it, there is no common ground. There is no shared identity. There is just a bunch of smart old men scattered across infinity with no reason to cooperate. That is a strange thing to think about. The arrogance is destructive. It creates inequality. It enables exploitation. It blinds the Ricks to threats they should see coming. But it is also the creative force that built the Citadel in the first place. It is both the thing that makes the Citadel possible and the thing that makes the Citadel rotten. That is actually one of the most interesting things the show does with the Citadel. It shows us that the same quality that allows people to build something great is often the same quality that eventually destroys it. The arrogance that united the Ricks is the same arrogance that tore them apart. Without the arrogance, you also lose one of the show's most powerful pieces of commentary. The Citadel is a mirror. It reflects real-world power structures. It shows us what happens when a group of people who believe they are superior build a society based on that belief. It shows us the inequality that follows, the exploitation that follows, the blind spots that follow. And it shows us what happens when the people at the bottom of that system finally find a leader who is willing to tear it all down. The Citadel storyline is Rick and Morty at its most ambitious and its most thoughtful. And none of it works without the arrogance being at the center. The show uses the Citadel to ask questions that go far beyond the world of Rick and Morty. What happens when intelligence becomes a justification for cruelty? What happens when a shared identity becomes a tool of control? What happens when the people in charge are so convinced of their own superiority that they cannot see the revolution coming? These are not just questions about Ricks and Mortys. These are questions about power, about society, about the stories we tell ourselves to justify the way things are. And the arrogance of the Citadel Ricks is what makes those questions possible. Without it, the Citadel is just a city full of smart people. It is interesting, but not meaningful. It is a cool concept, but not a commentary on anything. The arrogance is what turns the Citadel from a fun idea into a story that actually says something. And losing that is losing one of the most thoughtful and layered things the show has ever done. The Citadel Ricks without their arrogance are just geniuses living in a city. With it, they are a warning about what happens when the smartest people in the room start believing that smart is the same thing as good. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while the Citadel Ricks show us what arrogance looks like when it builds an empire, there is one final character in this show whose defining trait sits on the opposite end of the scale. Because when you look at Scary Terry and that constant, loud, over-the-top aggression that defines every second he is on screen, you realize that removing it reveals something the show itself was trying to tell us all along. Section 12. Scary Terry without his aggression. Scary Terry is a character who shows up for one episode and leaves an impression that lasts forever. He is a direct parody of Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. He has the hat, the burned face, the bladed glove. He chases people through their dreams. He is supposed to be terrifying. And when Rick and Morty first encounter him, he is exactly that. He is loud, he is threatening, he is aggressive in a way that seems completely unstoppable. He chases them through dream after dream, screaming threats, slashing at them, doing everything in his power to be the scariest thing they have ever seen. His aggression is dialed up to the absolute maximum from the moment he appears on screen. He does not have a calm setting. He does not have a quiet mode. He is just pure, constant, unfiltered aggression from the second he shows up. But here is the thing that makes Scary Terry one of the most memorable one-episode characters in the entire show. His aggression is a performance. It is not who he really is. And the show reveals this in one of the most unexpectedly sweet and surprisingly emotional scenes it has ever done. After being chased by Scary Terry through multiple dream levels, Rick and Morty come up with a plan. Instead of running from him, they decide to go into his dreams. Scary Terry falls asleep and Rick and Morty enter his subconscious. And what they find in there is not a monster. It is not a nightmare creature. It is a deeply insecure person having anxiety dreams about not being scary enough. In Scary Terry's dream, he is standing in front of a classroom in his underwear, trying to scare the students, and failing. The students are laughing at him. His teacher is telling him he is not good enough. He is being humiliated in front of everyone because he cannot perform the one thing he is supposed to be good at. Scary Terry, the terrifying dream demon who is just chasing Rick and Morty with murderous rage, is having a nightmare about being a failure. That scene changes everything about how we see Scary Terry. All of that aggression, all of that screaming and threatening and chasing, it was not coming from a place of power. It was coming from a place of fear. Scary Terry is aggressive because he is terrified of not being scary. His entire identity, his entire sense of self-worth, depends on being the most frightening thing in the room. And when he is alone, when the performance stops, when there is nobody left to intimidate, he is just a scared person who is afraid he is not good enough. The aggression is armor. It is the wall he puts up between himself and the possibility that he might actually be weak. Rick and Morty see this, and instead of using it against him, they do something kind. They help him in his dream. They stand up for him. They comfort him. And when Scary Terry wakes up, he remembers what they did. He remembers that these two people who he was trying to kill saw him at his most vulnerable and chose to be nice to him. And just like that, Scary Terry stops being aggressive toward them. He becomes their friend, he helps them, he is grateful. The aggression was never really who he was. It was just the only way he knew how to exist in the world. And the moment someone showed him that he did not have to be scary to be valued, he dropped the act completely. So what happens when you take Scary Terry's aggression away from the start? What happens if Scary Terry never has that loud, threatening, over-the-top exterior? If he is just the insecure person underneath from the very beginning? The answer is that you lose one of the best character reveals the show has ever done. Because the entire point of Scary Terry is the contrast between who he appears to be and who he actually is. The aggression is the setup. The vulnerability is the punchline, and without the setup, the punchline does not land. Think about how the episode works. When Scary Terry first shows up, we are scared of him, or at least we are supposed to be. He looks terrifying. He sounds terrifying. He acts terrifying. He is chasing our characters with actual weapons and genuine intent to harm them. Every instinct we have as viewers tells us that this is a dangerous creature who needs to be avoided or defeated. The show spends real time building up Scary Terry as a threat. He chases them through dreams. He follows them through layers of subconscious. He seems unstoppable. And all of that buildup, all of that time spent establishing Scary Terry as something to be afraid of, is what makes the dream scene hit so hard. Because we go from being afraid of this character to feeling sorry for him in the span of about 30 seconds. That emotional turn only works because the aggression came first. If Scary Terry was soft and insecure from the beginning, there is no turn. There is no surprise. There is no moment where the audience's entire perception of a character flips upside down. He is just a sad character from the start. And sad characters without a reveal are not nearly as interesting. Scary Terry without aggression also loses his function as a parody. He is a parody of Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger is defined by being aggressive and scary. That is the whole point of the character. He invades your dreams and he terrorizes you. Scary Terry takes that concept and pushes it to a comedic extreme. He is so aggressive that it becomes funny. He adds the word bitch to the end of almost every sentence, which is the show's way of making his aggression absurd and ridiculous. He is scary in a way that is clearly over the top, clearly performative, clearly being played for laughs, even as it is being played for tension. That balance between genuine threat and comedic exaggeration is what makes Scary Terry work as a parody. Without the aggression, there is nothing to parody. He is just a small, nervous creature living in someone's dreams who is not particularly scary. That might be endearing, but it is not funny. And it is definitely not a parody. But let us go deeper than the comedy and the parody. Scary Terry's aggression matters because of what the show is saying through him. Rick and Morty, as a show, is obsessed with the idea that people are not what they appear to be. Rick appears to be a cold, unfeeling genius, but underneath, he is a broken man who is terrified of losing the people he loves. Morty appears to be a helpless sidekick, but underneath, he is capable of real bravery and moral clarity. Jerry appears to be a pathetic loser, but underneath, he has a kind of stubborn survivability that nobody gives him credit for. The show keeps telling us the same thing over and over. The surface is not the truth. The mask is not the face. And Scary Terry is maybe the purest, most distilled version of that theme in the entire series. His aggression is the mask. His insecurity is the face. And the show uses him to demonstrate that even the most frightening, most aggressive, most seemingly powerful exterior can be hiding the most fragile, most vulnerable, most human interior. That is not just a character beat. That is a statement about how the world works. How many people in real life are aggressive because they are afraid? How many people act tough because they feel weak? How many people put on a loud, intimidating exterior because the quiet truth underneath is something they cannot bear to show anyone? Scary Terry is the show's answer to that question. He is the embodiment of the idea that aggression is usually fear wearing a costume, and you cannot make that point without the aggression being there first. You need the costume to show what is hiding underneath it. Rick and Morty's decision to help Scary Terry in his dream is also one of the most important character moments for both of them. It shows us that Rick, despite everything, is capable of empathy when he encounters genuine vulnerability. And it shows us that Morty's instinct toward kindness is real and consistent. They could have used Scary Terry's insecurity against him. They could have exploited his weakness to escape. That would have been the Rick thing to do. But instead, they helped him. They chose compassion. And the result was that a violent enemy became a loyal friend. The show is saying something really simple here. Kindness works. Meeting someone's vulnerability with compassion instead of exploitation creates connection. And that message only lands because Scary Terry was so aggressive at the start that kindness seemed like the last possible response. Without the aggression, Rick and Morty are just being nice to a nervous guy in a dream. There is no transformation. There is no enemy becoming a friend. There is no demonstration that compassion can disarm violence. The whole moral of the scene disappears because there was never any aggression for the compassion to overcome. Scary Terry also works as a perfect closing point for this entire essay because he ties everything together. This video essay has been about what happens when you remove the one defining trait from a character. And Scary Terry is the character where the show itself actually shows us the answer. The show literally takes us behind the aggression and shows us who Scary Terry is without it. And who he is without it is someone completely different. Someone softer. Someone scared. Someone who just wants to be told he is enough. That is what sits underneath the one trait that defines him. And the show is suggesting that the same might be true for everyone. Every character we have talked about in this essay has a defining trait that functions the same way Scary Terry's aggression does. It is the thing the world sees. It is the armor they wear. Rick's intelligence, Morty's anxiety, Jerry's insecurity, Beth's daddy issues, Summer's need to be cool, Birdperson's loyalty, Evil Morty's ambition, Squanchy's recklessness, Mr. Poopy Butthole's positivity, the Citadel Ricks' arrogance. All of these traits are the surface. They are the costume. And what this essay has been exploring, character by character, is what happens when you take the costume off. What is left? Who are these people when the one thing that defines them is gone? Scary Terry gives us the answer the show has been building toward all along. Underneath the defining trait, there is always something more vulnerable, more human, more real. The trait is not who they are. It is how they survive. And the difference between those two things is where all the best storytelling in Rick and Morty lives. Scary Terry without his aggression is just a scared person having bad dreams. But with it, he is the show's most perfect example of the truth that has been running underneath every single section of this essay. That the thing you show the world and the thing you actually are might be completely different. And the space between those two things is where every great character lives. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.